Ah, the macroeconomy, where nations play money chess and everything from gas prices to your morning coffee is on the board. It's enough to make you want to reach for another caffeine jolt, isn't it? Because frankly, trying to understand the global economy can feel like staring into a magic eye picture after a few espressos. But never fear, dear viewers, because today we're going to break down the main drivers behind how entire economies move and shake, in a way even your goldfish Nigel could understand. Let's dive in, shall we? First up, we have GDP, or Gross Domestic Product. Now, while that name might sound like something you'd find in a dumpster behind a Waffle House at 2 a.m., it's actually pretty important. Think of GDP as the economy's engine. It measures the total value of everything a country produces in a given time. That's right, everything from artisanal beard combs to those little umbrellas in your cocktails that you definitely don't steal. When GDP is growing, it generally means people are working, spending money, and feeling good about the future. Businesses are booming, investors are throwing money at anything that moves, and even your Uncle Gary might finally pay back that loan from 2008. But what happens when the GDP engine sputters? Well, that's when things can get a bit messy. A shrinking GDP is a big red flag, often signaling a recession or economic slowdown. People get nervous, businesses start tightening their belts, and suddenly that artisanal beard comb factory starts looking a lot less appealing to investors. It's basically the economic equivalent of finding out your favorite band is Nickelback. Nobody's happy about it. So, what actually drives GDP? Well, it's a whole cocktail of factors: income levels, job growth, investment, and even something as fickle as consumer confidence. Because let's be honest, if everyone's convinced the economy's about to go belly up, they're probably not going to be lining up for the latest iPhone, are they? Next up, let's talk about everyone's favorite party guest, inflation. Or its less exciting cousin, deflation. This is all about prices, how much your money is actually worth, and whether your dollar today will buy you a stick of gum tomorrow, or just a sad, deflated balloon. Inflation is when prices go up, and away like a SpaceX rocket carrying your dreams of ever affording a house. Suddenly that avocado toast is looking less like a millennial breakfast staple and more like a luxury item. Deflation, on the other hand, is when prices drop. Now, while this might sound like a dream come true for bargain hunters, it can actually be a sign of weak demand or even bigger economic troubles brewing. So, what's behind these price fluctuations? Well, it's a delicate dance between supply and demand, seasoned with a dash of government policy and a sprinkle of good old-fashioned human psychology. When demand for goods and services outstrips supply, like everyone suddenly needing hand sanitizer and toilet paper in March 2020, prices tend to go up. On the flip side, when supply is high but demand is low, say, everyone suddenly decided to take up knitting instead of buying new clothes, prices might drop. Of course, it's never quite that simple, is it? We also have to factor in things like wages, energy prices, and the ever-meddling hand of central banks. Because, as we'll see later, those folks have a few tricks up their sleeves when it comes to trying to keep inflation in check. Now let's talk about something that keeps policymakers up at night, besides, the existential dread of global annihilation, unemployment. Simply put, it's the number of people who want a job but can't find one. And trust me, it's a lot more fun to talk about on YouTube than to actually experience it. High unemployment is like a bad house guest. It overstays its welcome, eats all your snacks, and generally makes life miserable for everyone. It leads to less spending, slower economic growth, and a whole lot of frustrated job seekers. On the other hand, low unemployment is generally seen as a good thing. It means more people have money in their pockets, which they can then spend on important things like rent, groceries, and those tiny hats for their cats. However, even low unemployment can be a double-edged sword. If it gets too low, it can actually contribute to inflation. Think about it. If everyone and their pet hamster has a job, businesses have to compete for workers, driving up wages, which can then lead to higher prices for consumers. It's a delicate balancing act. So, what affects unemployment? Well, it's a whole jungle out there, influenced by everything from business cycles and technological advancements to global trade and government policies. Now, let's talk about interest rates, which are essentially the cost of borrowing money. And if you're thinking, John, this is getting a bit dry, even for you, just hold on, because interest rates are the puppet strings that central banks use to try and control the economic marionette show. Low interest rates are like a shot of espresso for the economy. They make borrowing cheaper, encouraging people to take out loans, businesses to invest, and consumers to spend, spend, spend. However, like any good stimulant, low interest rates can also have some unwanted side effects, like inflation. See, when everyone's flush with cheap cash, it can lead to a surge in demand, pushing prices up faster than a caffeinated squirrel on a trampoline. That's where high interest rates come in. They're the economic equivalent of a cold shower, designed to cool things down when the economy starts overheating. High rates make borrowing more expensive, which can help to curb inflation, but they can also slow down economic growth and make it harder for businesses to invest and create jobs. So you see, central banks have to walk a tightrope, carefully adjusting interest rates to try and find that sweet spot between economic growth and stable prices. It's a tough job, but hey, somebody's got to do it. Finally, let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room: government policy. Now, while some politicians might like to pretend that the economy operates independently of their decisions, the truth is, governments have a whole toolbox of levers and pulleys they can use to influence the economy, for better or for worse. We can break these tools down into two main categories: fiscal policy and monetary policy. Fiscal policy is all about how the government spends its money and collects taxes. Think of it like this. When the economy's feeling sluggish, the government can pump money into it through increased spending or tax cuts, like a shot of adrenaline to the heart. This can help boost demand, create jobs, and get things moving again. On the other hand, when the economy's getting a little too hot for its own good, the government can try to cool things down by cutting spending or raising taxes, like a responsible designated driver taking away the punch bowl before things get out of hand. Then we have monetary policy, which is controlled by a country's central bank. We already talked about how central banks use interest rates to try and control inflation, but they have other tricks up their sleeves as well. They can print more money, which sounds like a recipe for disaster, but in the right circumstances, it can actually be helpful. And they can also set inflation targets, which is basically their way of saying, this is how much we're willing to let prices rise before we hit the panic button. So, there you have it, the 5 main drivers of the macroeconomy, TLDR. The macroeconomy is driven by a mix of growth, GDP, prices, inflation, jobs, unemployment, money, interest rates, and government decisions, all tangled up in a web of global trade, psychology, and occasional chaos. It's a complex and constantly evolving system, kind of like a multi-car pileup on the highway, but with slightly higher stakes. But hey, at least now you can impress your friends at parties with your newfound knowledge of economic jargon. Just try not to bring it up during the appetizer course, because nobody wants to talk about deflation when there are pigs in a blanket on the line. And on that note, I'm going to go see if I can find someone who can explain quantitative easing to me using only emojis. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and try not to think too much about the impending economic apocalypse.